We'll talk about one of our evaluations that we've done now as an example of some of the work we do. That's one that we might going to hear about later. And it was done from the crime reduction team, and it's one of our specialist court evaluations that I've been talking about. The Murray people are Indigenous people of Queensland, and the Queensland Murray Court is essentially a specialist court set up to provide a more culturally appropriate way of being processed through the criminal justice system, or the court system, when you've been accused of committing a crime. And there's a number of sites set up around the adult and youth Murray courts across Queensland. We were asked a couple of years ago to go in there and evaluate those as best we could. Can we do these courts reduce the overrepresentation of Indigenous offenders in prison and juvenile detention? Can they make a difference there? Can they reduce the rate at which Indigenous offenders fail to appear in court, the no-shows if you like? Can we decrease the rate of reoffending and the number of court orders that are breached by Indigenous offenders? And do these courts strengthen the partnership between the magistrates and the children's courts and Indigenous communities with as to how they deal with Indigenous justice matters? These are the sort of the key areas that we want to try and check out what was going to happen. Well, I should also mention all these presentations will be available online within a matter of weeks, so don't forget to write every single line down in case you would. So what do? We set up a mixed methods approach, a qualitative and a quantitative methodology to actually try and assess what was going on across 5 court sites. We created an offender profile and a database of Murray Court participants, and we then had a matched control group we also collected data for. And the control group were those who were of similar offences and natures, but didn't actually go through Murray Court, and they're Aboriginal people as well. There's an extensive consultation process, as you might imagine, with a range of stakeholders. We observed a number of Murray Court hearings, and we also did a quantitative analysis of some of the key outcomes in comparison between the matched group and the offenders who went through Murray Court. So we knew all the outcomes, what they were sentenced to, did they breach, did they re-offend, those sorts of issues to try and sort of map over a relatively short period of time what happened when people went through this court versus the normal system. And because we're doing research in the real world, we had a number of problems we had to overcome, and that's one thing as you get into research you find is there's the theory and there's the practice. The theory is great, it all works really nicely, and people will tell you the program's doing everything it says in a nice, ordered way. The reality is when you get people involved in things, things don't work that way. Things get tailored, you find you haven't got the resources you want, you find that the program could work better if you just tweak it a little bit at the edges, and everyone tweaks slightly differently. And so what you find is when you get on the ground is things may not be what you expected. This is the case for most research you do in the field. So some of the things we found were, firstly, the administrative data that was being collected by the courts program was pretty limited. So we actually created a whole new data system, which we used, and we got them to fill in for us, and they agreed to do that. Without that, we wouldn't have the data to actually do the analysis. Also, what you hope we do in evaluation is the program's been in place for a bit of time, it's nice and stable, everything's working smoothly, you all know how it all works, it's all set up really nicely and off it goes. The reality is often very different. Often these programs are changing every day, or very, very frequently. They expand, they change their focus, and you've got to try and deal with that when you're doing the evaluation. There may be different views on what the court's actually doing, how it might operate, how the model works. You've got to try and take into account that. And also, and that seems like a positive, there's a high level of support or investment for this program. Now, why is that potentially a negative? Anyone want to hazard a guess?
Bias?
Yep, bias is one thing, yep.
I want it to be successful.
They want it to be successful, yeah. And so if you actually come out and find results that show it's maybe not as successful as they hoped, there may be a bit of reluctance to accept those views. So that's important too. And what you've got to do is you've got to stand your ground. If you think your research is right, you can certainly work with an agency around how you shape the final report, how you shape the recommendations, but you've really got to stand your ground and maintain the objectivity and the validity of your data and your findings. Okay, so you can certainly seek advice on what you're finding and brainstorm it a bit and see what comes out and workshop why it might be, and maybe even do further analysis to try and confirm your findings, but you've got to maintain the line. And sometimes pressure can be put on to have you change what your findings are. I'm not saying in this particular case, but it can be an issue. So you've got to be aware of that. What are our results? Well, as I sort of indicated, there was actually a fair bit of variability across how the 5 courts worked for a start. So it wasn't all smooth and everything the same thing. I'm not saying it's a problem, I'm just saying it's something you've got to deal with. Okay, what we found was overall the offenders seen by the Murray Court were less likely to abscond subject to warrant. In other words, they actually did appear at court when they were meant to. It's a good thing. The imprisonment rates were pretty similar between Murray Court and mainstream courts. Whereas with Murray Court, the Murray Court was more likely to impose sentences that enable some post-sentence rehabilitation. Rehabilitation is really important, as I'm sure you all get. Putting people in jail is one thing, but if you actually want to make a difference and stop them re-offending, you've got to do something with them usually. Especially for those offenders who maybe have a pathway or a career of offending. So rehabilitation is a good thing, so having that extra thing, again, positive outcome for the court. One of the significant findings, though, really significant, was that appearing for sentence in Murray Court had no impact on the re-offending rate among Indigenous offenders in the short term. Obviously the hope was if you go through Murray Court, you have a better cultural experience, you won't come back and offend as much. They didn't find that, or we didn't find that in the interim. Now it's only a short term of time, but nevertheless we didn't find any difference. That finding wasn't popular. Nevertheless, there was a real finding, and we did further work to make sure it was a real finding. There was some good qualitative evidence, though, that the Murray Court had done what it was intending to do around creating a more culturally appropriate partnership between the courts and the local communities. People felt they'd been treated with respect, they felt that the process was better for them when they went through that Murray Court process and the mainstream court. There's improved perceptions of fairness, which is important. And the level of participation of Indigenous offenders, Indigenous persons, was higher through the court and sentencing process. So it's a good thing. So the only real negative was they had hoped to actually reduce offending as well. That one they didn't get at this point. But everything else is pretty positive. So overall, my conclusion was this is a pretty good program. It has a lot of benefits. And maybe over time it will also reduce recidivism, but it wasn't showing it right now. So we made a lot of recommendations, as you might expect, as to how we could improve the operation of the courts, how we could expand the courts. And that new data system which we created was so good that in fact it's now being used by not just the Murray courts, but a whole range of specialist courts in Queensland. So it wasn't just about research, it was also about value adding or investing in the infrastructure, which I thought was really positive for us. We're now doing further work on evaluating a broader specialist court program in Queensland. So despite the negative result, they obviously didn't think we did a bad job. They respected the fact we came up with a decent finding using a decent methodology, and within a matter of seconds we were hired again to do some other work, which I think is also important. So yeah, this is important stuff. So that's one example of some work we've been doing in the last couple of years, and that report's available on our website. So now moving on to sort of the other roles of the AIC, that's really important once you do research, you actually get it out there. And we've done a lot of work to try and create a range of pathways to do that. We've got our Criminology TV, our own YouTube site, which I'm sure you've all looked at. Yes, good. And we've also got our Facebook site, which I'm sure most of you looked at, given we get comments quite regularly and just some thumbs up likes for a range of our publications. And I haven't got too many of those yet, which is good. But it's good that we do actually comment, because partly your comments led us to do the first of these forums and now the second of these forums. We like to see some of the things you come up with, and in fact the Facebook questions you raised after our call for questions for this forum will actually be used this afternoon for a Q&A we're going to be doing to finish off the day. So it's good to have your input. We actually want the input, and Facebook's another way for us to sort of get access to people. So it's good. So we have a range of ways you can get access to material. Our JB Barry libraries are probably the best criminology collection in the country. It includes the Cinch searchable database, which is I'm sure you've all used, which you can search out of AIC online through our website. We do a range of publications each year. We have 2 sets which are peer-reviewed and 2 sets which are grey literature, which are equally valuable in my view, but usually a bit smaller. So I'd encourage you to go and download our pubs. They're all available for free downloading. Website's ongoing refinement of the website. We're currently getting 200,000 page views a month, and we're still growing. That's great. Again, if you've got ideas about what you'd like to see on our website or things you'd like, let us know. Happy to take advice from the field. Mail lists, we have a range of regular stakeholders. We're also now running through Web2 RSS feed, so if you actually want to know what we're doing, new initiatives in the field, you can actually sign up for an RSS feed, as well as following Twitter and Facebook to actually get up to date on what we're actually doing. It's free services. The library will talk about them in more detail, but they're important ways for us to get out to the field to make sure our work's being used. That's what we want. No good sitting on a shelf, we want to use it. To have you use it. We've also created a couple of online data tools. You can go and run your own analyses. They're fairly simple at the moment. One's on Facts and Figures, which is a compendium of crime data produced each year, and one's on drugs and offending online, which is part of the JUMA program, which Jason will talk about in a minute. You can go and play around and do various analyses on that. The intention is to expand and put a range of other data sets up for you to play with online as well. to run analyses, graph, etc., etc. That's a work in progress, requires resources to do it bit by bit. We also run a number of conferences each year. This year we've already run 2 conferences, the ones that we've got up there, which is the Young People Risk and Resilience Conference in Victoria in March, I think it was. Yeah, March. And that basically was a partnership we did with the Victoria Safer Communities Network to explore issues around young people and risk and resilience. Focus on alcohol and drugs and violence were key issues of that. 2-day conference, really successful, 200 people turned up. Good event. We also ran one in Sydney recently with the New South Wales AG's department, Attorney General's department, on meeting the needs of victims of crime. Again, 200 people turned up, a couple of days of interesting presentations around how you support victims of crime, what they need, how we can make things better. That's also important. Later this year, we're running a 2-day event in Sydney, again with New South Wales AGs, on essentially a technical conference looking at cost-benefit analysis, geospatial mapping, and other economic analyses of crime. That'll be really interesting with a couple of key international speakers doing workshops. And next year, we're going to be running our International Serious and Organised Crime Conference number 2, which will be happening in June next year. We ran a successful big conference, mainly for law enforcement last year. We're doing it again next year, as well as potentially a 2-day event in Victoria on sex offending and sex offenders. So we get out there in terms of conferencing as well. We try and get the message out and we try and get people in to sort of provide information for the field, the most recent, the most up-to-date and the best info we can. Okay, on to employment before I finish up, just in case you're interested. Each year we run our internship program. 4 or 5 people get selected from usually about 80 to 100 applications from across the country to spend 4 weeks at the AIC full-time. There's a small stipend that sort of helps defray your costs. And essentially you get to come and work in our research teams doing research tasks, which might be design of a project, data collection, lit reviewing, preparing publications, etc., etc. So if you're interested, in October this year we'll be running the usual, or the next round of nominations. It'll be on Facebook, it'll be on Twitter, and on our website. If you're interested in coming and spending some time with us, please put an application in. We'd love to see you. But they are competitive, so we're going to take a small number on because, frankly, we can't manage more than 4 or 5. We've got a microchip and all that sort of stuff. It takes money, so... Okay. The last plug is employment. When you finish your degrees, if you're interested in working for us, you can certainly send us your CVs and express your interest. Or you can wait for a round of our employment recruitment that we often do. And in fact, next week or the week after, I'll be actually advertising the papers for research officers and more senior research analysts for the AIC. I need some more staff because we've picked up some additional contract work I need to actually put some people onto. So if you're interested in applying, please look in the papers or look at our website. Probably Saturday week they'll be up. But essentially, we offer research officer positions which are usually designed for young graduates with limited experience, and you can progress through the hierarchy all the way up to what's going to be called a principal research analyst or then research manager levels. And in fact, Jason Payne, who I'm going to introduce in a second, actually is a great example of what you can achieve at the AIC if you want to, and I'll talk about that in a sec. But yeah, we have research officer positions, plus for those with higher degrees and a bit of experience, you can also come in at more senior levels and come straight into a more senior position as a research leader. That's also jobs that we offer from time to time. We may be seeking particular specialisations to fill particular gaps. Often we just ask generically, who's around and create a list of suitable candidates and pull them off as we need them. But you're welcome to come and talk further about employment opportunities with us. I think we offer a fairly exciting world to work in. I said we are pseudo-government, we're not quite pure academic, but that provides really some challenges for staff in the sense that we also get access to material many academics don't get access to, and we get to have also our voices heard by government probably more often than a lot of university-based academics too. And I quite like that because I like to actually have an influence on what I'm